My beloved child, stop for a moment, because something happened last night that you were never supposed to hear about this soon. There was a moment when your soulmate was alone with their thoughts, and something inside them finally became too heavy to hide. They tried to distract themselves. They tried to act normal. They tried to convince themselves that they had already moved on from whatever was troubling their heart. But then, in the stillness of the night, when there was no one around to impress, no one to convince, and nowhere left to run, your name entered their thoughts again. And this time, it did not come as a casual memory. It came with emotion. It came with regret. It came with a realization they had been fighting for much longer than you know. They remembered something about you that they had never fully understood before, and that realization shook them. This is why I need you to listen carefully. Don't skip, because the next few moments may reveal why their behavior has felt so confusing, why their silence has carried so much weight, and why something about the connection between you seems impossible for them to simply forget. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and the secret is not what you might expect. Your soulmate has been carrying something privately, something they did not want you to discover because they were afraid that once you knew the truth, you would see them differently. They were afraid you might think they were weak. They were afraid you might think they did not care enough. They were afraid you might realize just how deeply this connection affected them. But last night, something changed. A memory returned. A feeling resurfaced. A question appeared in their mind that they could not silence. And the question was simple, yet powerful: what if I was wrong about us? That question stayed with them. They looked back at moments they once dismissed. They remembered conversations they pretended were ordinary. They remembered the way you looked at them when they were not expecting it. They remembered words you said that seemed insignificant at the time but somehow became louder with every passing day. They remembered your patience. They remembered your presence. They remembered the way you made them feel seen without demanding anything in return. And suddenly, they understood that perhaps the person they had been trying so hard to forget was the very person they had been unconsciously searching for everywhere else. Don't skip. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because there is more to this than simple missing. There is a hidden emotional truth unfolding beneath everything you have seen. Imagine the clock moving quietly through the night while the world around them becomes still, yet their mind refuses to rest. They may have closed their eyes, but the memories kept returning. One moment in particular became impossible to ignore. It was not necessarily the biggest moment you shared. In fact, it may have been something incredibly simple. Maybe it was a conversation that lasted longer than expected. Maybe it was a moment when neither of you knew what to say, yet somehow everything was understood. Maybe it was the first time they realized that being around you felt different from being around everyone else. Whatever that moment was, last night it returned with a completely different meaning. They began to understand why they had felt unsettled whenever distance appeared between you. They began to understand why certain songs, places, words, or ordinary situations could suddenly remind them of you. They began to understand why they sometimes wanted to reach out and then stopped themselves at the last second. There is a secret behind that hesitation, and it has nothing to do with a lack of feeling. The secret is that they have been afraid of what might happen if they finally become honest. They know honesty could change everything. If they admit what they feel, there is no comfortable hiding place left. They would have to face the possibility that they hurt someone who genuinely cared. They would have to face the possibility that they walked away from something rare. They would have to face the possibility that their own fear created the distance they now desperately wish they could undo. And that realization can make a person cry, not because they are weak, but because there are some truths that become impossible to carry quietly. Last night, they may have felt that weight more strongly than ever. Something reminded them of you, and suddenly the emotional wall they had built began to crack. They remembered how they tried to appear unaffected. They remembered moments when they wanted to say more but chose silence. They remembered opportunities they allowed to pass because they were unsure, afraid, proud, confused, or simply not ready. Then came the thought that frightened them most: what if the moment they have been waiting for has already passed? What if the person they thought would always be there eventually decides they deserve someone who does not hesitate? That thought stayed with them. Don't skip now. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because the secret they have been hiding is beginning to reveal itself through the emotions they can no longer control. There is another layer to this story that you need to understand, because the tears connected to this secret are not only about missing you. They are about something they never told you about themselves. Somewhere along the way, they started believing they were not enough for you. They may have hidden this behind confidence, distance, jokes, silence, or even an attitude that made it seem as though they did not care. But underneath that outer behavior was a completely different conversation happening inside their mind. They wondered whether you would eventually discover their imperfections and become disappointed. They wondered whether they could truly give you the kind of connection you deserved. They wondered whether you would stay if you knew everything they were struggling to understand about themselves. So instead of allowing you close enough to see those fears, they created distance. They may have told themselves that distance would protect both of you. They may have convinced themselves that leaving things unfinished was easier than risking rejection. But last night, that logic began to collapse. Because distance does not erase feelings. Silence does not erase memories. And pretending not to care does not make the heart forget what mattered. This is the secret they never wanted you to know. There were moments when they were not pulling away because they felt nothing. They were pulling away because they felt too much and did not know how to handle it. Read that again in your heart. They were not necessarily running from you. They may have been running from the version of themselves that appeared whenever you were near. You brought emotions to the surface that they had spent years keeping hidden. You made them question things they had always accepted. You made them wonder whether love could actually feel safe, whether vulnerability could be beautiful, and whether they could finally stop pretending that everything was under control. And last night, one memory made that realization impossible to ignore. They remembered a time when you gave them an opportunity to be honest, and instead of opening their heart, they protected it. Now they wonder whether you noticed. They wonder whether you understood what they were really trying to say through their silence. They wonder whether you ever realized how many words remain trapped behind the things they actually said. Don't skip. Stay till the end, because this is where the story becomes even more unexpected. Something huge is waiting for you, and the next revelation explains why their emotions have suddenly become so difficult for them to hide. Listen closely to what comes next. Because this is where the hidden truth becomes more personal. Your soulmate has been remembering the version of you that existed before everything became complicated. Before misunderstandings. Before distance. Before unanswered questions. Before either of you started protecting yourselves. They remember the natural connection, the effortless moments, the feeling that neither person needed to perform or pretend. And last night, they compared that memory with the present. That comparison hurt. Not because the past was perfect, but because they realized how much they had allowed fear to change something that once felt genuine. They began asking themselves why they waited so long to say what mattered. Why did they assume there would always be another opportunity? Why did they think you would understand their silence forever? Why did they believe that time would solve everything automatically? The answers were uncomfortable. They realized that time does not always heal what people refuse to address. Sometimes time simply makes the truth louder. Every day they avoided the conversation, the unfinished feelings remained. Every time they convinced themselves they were fine, another memory quietly returned. Every time they saw something that reminded them of you, they felt that strange mixture of warmth and sadness. And last night, perhaps for the first time, they admitted to themselves that they still care. That admission may have brought tears because it meant they could no longer hide behind excuses. They could no longer say it was only nostalgia. They could no longer say it was just curiosity. They could no longer pretend that your absence meant nothing. Something about you had remained inside their heart long after the circumstances changed. But there is something even deeper. They are not only remembering what you gave them. They are remembering who they became when they were around you. They felt softer. Did not arrive at these words by accident. There is something unusually heavy surrounding the heart of the person you think about most, and tonight, their silence carries a message they have been unable to speak aloud. They have been holding something inside for far longer than you realize, something they never planned to reveal because they were afraid that once you knew the truth, you might look at them differently. But something has changed. Their emotions are becoming impossible to hide, and the secret they protected so carefully is beginning to rise to the surface. Don't skip this, because the next few moments may reveal why their behavior has felt so confusing. Why they sometimes seem incredibly close and then suddenly distant. Why their eyes can appear full of emotion while their words say almost nothing. There is a reason for that contradiction. There is a reason they have been fighting an invisible battle between what they feel and what they believe they are allowed to say. And the most surprising part is this: the secret may not be about another person, another relationship, or anything you have been fearing. It may be about you. It may be about how deeply you affected them without even realizing it. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and before this story is over, you may understand a moment from your past that once seemed completely ordinary but actually carried a meaning you could never have imagined. Your soulmate has been replaying certain memories in their mind, especially the quiet ones, the moments when nothing dramatic happened, the moments when you simply looked at them, listened to them, smiled at them, or walked away without knowing what was happening inside their heart. Those moments became more powerful with time. At first, they tried to convince themselves that it was temporary. They told themselves they would eventually stop thinking about you. They tried to stay busy, focus on other responsibilities, and act as though everything was normal. But the more they tried to bury the feeling, the stronger it became. There were nights when they almost reached out to you and then stopped. There were messages they typed but never sent. There were conversations they imagined having with you, only to erase them from their mind the next morning. And there was one truth they could not escape: pretending not to care was becoming harder than admitting that they cared deeply. Don't skip, because there is a deeper layer to this. They may have been crying, but not necessarily because something terrible happened. Sometimes tears come when someone finally realizes how much they have been carrying alone. Sometimes a person cries because they miss someone they are afraid to approach. Sometimes they cry because they wish they could go back to one particular moment and say the words they were too afraid to say. Your soulmate may have experienced exactly that kind of emotional moment. Something reminded them of you, perhaps a song, a familiar place, a photograph, a simple phrase, or even a random detail that no one else would understand. Suddenly, the emotional wall they built around themselves became weaker. The memories returned all at once, and with them came the realization that they had been hiding something from the person they most wanted to understand them. Stay till the end, because the secret becomes clearer as we move forward. You need to understand that people often hide the strongest feelings, not the weakest ones. A person who feels nothing has little reason to struggle with silence. But someone who feels too much may become frightened by the intensity of their own emotions. That may be what happened here. Your soulmate did not necessarily disappear because they stopped caring. They may have pulled back because caring became too real. They may have been afraid of rejection, afraid of losing control, afraid of being vulnerable, or afraid that their feelings would change the entire connection between you. Imagine carrying a sentence in your heart for months or even years, knowing exactly what you want to say but never finding the courage to speak it. Imagine seeing the person connected to that sentence and pretending everything is fine. Imagine smiling while your heart is asking a completely different question. That is the emotional space they may have been living in. And now, something is shifting. The secret is no longer staying quiet inside them. You may notice small signs before anything obvious happens. They may suddenly become more attentive. They may remember details you thought they had forgotten. They may find unexpected reasons to appear around you. They may become unusually quiet when your name comes up. They may watch from a distance rather than approaching directly. They may ask about you through someone else. They may seem nervous when a conversation becomes emotionally meaningful. None of these things should be treated as absolute proof of another person's feelings, but together they can reveal something important. There may still be an emotional story that has never truly received its ending. And this is where the revelation becomes even more powerful. The secret they never wanted you to know may be that they were more affected by your presence than they ever admitted. Perhaps they pretended you were not important because admitting your importance would have made them vulnerable. Perhaps they acted strong because they were terrified that you would discover how easily you could reach their heart. Perhaps they told themselves that distance would make the feeling disappear, only to discover that distance made them notice your absence even more. Don't skip now. Stay till the end. Something huge is waiting for you, because there is one particular realization that may explain everything you have been wondering about. They may have been waiting for a sign from you, but not necessarily a dramatic sign. Sometimes the sign a person waits for is simply reassurance that they are not alone in what they feel. They may have needed to know that approaching you would not result in embarrassment or rejection. They may have needed one small indication that their vulnerability would be safe with you. And because they never received that certainty, they continued protecting themselves. This could explain why the connection has felt like a story that keeps beginning but never reaches its final chapter. There is emotion, then silence. There is closeness, then distance. There is hope, then hesitation. It creates a cycle that can leave both people confused. But behind that cycle may be a person who has never stopped asking themselves one question: what if I had told them the truth? That question can become incredibly powerful. It can return during quiet evenings, during lonely moments, during celebrations when everyone else seems happy, or during ordinary days when a familiar memory suddenly appears. They may wonder where you are, whether you think about them, whether you ever understood what they were trying to hide. They may wonder whether you have moved on. They may wonder whether they missed their opportunity. And sometimes, regret is not about something someone did. It is about something they never did. The conversation never started. The confession never happened. The apology was never spoken. The truth stayed locked inside. That may be the secret behind the tears. They are not necessarily crying because they lost you. They may be crying because they are finally realizing how much they risked losing by remaining silent. There is another possibility you should hear carefully. Perhaps they have been carrying guilt. Not guilt because they intentionally wanted to hurt you, but guilt because they know their behavior may have confused you. They know there were moments when they gave you hope and then withdrew. They know their silence may have looked like indifference. They know you may have questioned your own worth because of the way they behaved. And somewhere inside, they may wish they could explain that their distance was never a measurement of your value. It was a measurement of their fear. That distinction matters. Someone's inability to communicate does not automatically mean you were unworthy of communication. Someone's hesitation does not automatically mean you were unimportant. Sometimes people run from the very connection they secretly want because it forces them to confront parts of themselves they have avoided for years. Your presence may have made your soulmate see themselves more clearly. You may have awakened emotions they had successfully buried. You may have made them question old beliefs about love, trust, timing, and vulnerability. That is why the connection may feel unusually intense. It may not have been about how long you knew each other. It may have been about how deeply certain moments affected both of you. And there is one memory they may never have told you about. Perhaps it was the first moment they realized that their feelings were no longer casual. Maybe you said something simple, something you forgot 5 minutes later, but they remembered it for years. Maybe you looked at them when they were having a difficult day and somehow made them feel understood without asking too many questions. Maybe you showed kindness when they expected judgment. Maybe you walked away at a moment when they secretly wished you would stay. Whatever that moment was, it may have become a private landmark in their emotional world. They may have returned to it again and again. Don't skip, because this is where the hidden truth becomes more personal. Your soulmate may not have been crying only because they miss you. They may have been crying because they finally understood that they never truly stopped loving the version of themselves they became around you. With